My next pick is The Fall by Tarsem.
Great movie. I have seen this one, and I can confirm this is a great movie.
I love The Fall. I think The Fall is one of the best movies I've ever seen. I cannot for the life of me understand why more people haven't seen it. This movie is directed by Tarsem, who I think is a criminally underappreciated filmmaker. He did that movie The Cell with Jennifer Lopez in 2000. The Fall is one that was actually a passion project of his. He made this movie while he was doing commercials and music videos and traveling the world doing other projects, mostly self-financed it. It was made over a period of like 4 years in something like 24 different countries. He would just get the resources together, get the actors together, just film bits and pieces whenever he could. It's a mind-boggling achievement. It's one of the most visually astounding movies you will ever see. The plot is basically, it takes place in a hospital in, I think, the 1920s or possibly the 1910s. I forget the exact setting, but the early 20th century. A silent film stuntman played by Lee Pace in one of his first major acting roles. He has recently suffered an injury on a production and so is being treated at this hospital and may become a paraplegic for the rest of his life. He meets this young girl, played by a Romanian actress, I believe, and I think this was like her first and only movie, but Katinka Untaru is her name, and she's phenomenal in this movie. She isn't really an actress, and she doesn't really act in the movie. She just, is herself the entire time. But she meets the stuntman, is sort of fascinated by him. She starts spending time with him, and he starts telling her this story, this sort of like fairy tale. And the movie jumps back and forth between these scenes set in reality in this hospital and the fantasy that she is constructing in her mind based on the story that the stuntman is telling her. The story is kind of freeform. It's constantly shifting and moving around, and the actors are being switched out, and the locales are constantly changing. It basically makes no logical sense, but it's perfect because it's a story being imagined by a child in real time. So it's constantly changing and shifting around based on what's happening to her in the moment. I know some of the reviews have said like it's just sort of all style. It's a beautiful movie to look at, but there's not a lot of substance to it. I think that's bullshit. I think there is a ton of substance to this movie, but I think the reason so many people didn't think it had a lot of substance is because it's so visually stunning. Like, you spend so much time just looking at the images and the locations and the costumes and the cinematography that you kind of have to watch it 5 or 6 times before you can really absorb what it's actually about and not just, drool over the images that you're seeing. But it's actually, I think, a really deep movie about storytelling and what storytelling means. We start to realize at a certain point in the movie that the reason this stuntman is telling this little girl this story is to manipulate her into getting him more morphine so that he can commit suicide. The story begins to reflect his suicidal mindset, and the little girl, who doesn't really understand the adult world or adult emotions, doesn't really know why this is. To her, it's a story, and it's becoming, as it goes along, a story that she's enjoying less and less. It turns into a story about a little girl trying to save a man's life. And it's about how stories can reflect that, how they can reflect us, our choices, and how stories can be a destructive act or a constructive act.
I heard the movie come up recently because someone was talking about like movies that they wanted to see get a Criterion release, and The Fall actually came up. And apparently Tarsem chimed in at one point and was like, I've already reached out to Criterion and they're not interested. But hopefully that changes one day. It really is a movie that needs a better distribution, that needs to be on Criterion Channel, or I don't know if it's even on streaming or anything. But it is, still just as great as it ever was. And I'd love to own a copy of it. I hope it becomes available at some point.